Hello and welcome to the Woodlands Homestead podcast as part of Open House Melbourne. I'm Belinda Meyers and it's my absolute pleasure to be here with Dr Andrew Clarke, the CEO and Veterinary Director of Living Legends. Andrew, we're sitting outside the beautiful homestead here. What can you tell us about it?
Well, at first glimpse of the homestead, really it's a California bungalow, 1920 style. But once you walk into the front door, you enter the 1840s kit home. Very, very spacious, long corridor, big rooms, hand-painted walls, very typical of the kit homes that went to India actually for officers in the army back in the 1840s, 1850s. And the property was settled by William Pomeroy Greene. He was a retired naval officer. He had ill health, and his doctors advised him that he should move to either Australia or to Greece to get the better weather conditions. And the choice was made for him to come to, or he made the choice, and his family made the choice to come to Australia.
They arrived at a beautiful part of the world, and still to this day, a lot of it is largely untouched natural parklands. Can you describe for the people listening what else is here on the property as well as the homestead?
Yes, well, the homestead today is based on 1,700 acres of national park. The homestead is surrounded by all of the original outbuildings. We've got the groom's quarters, the chicken houses, the stable blocks. The only original building that's missing is actually the carriage house, which was knocked over in the 1920s when they had built the garage for motor cars to come along. So there's a whole story around the outbuildings. Living Legends is based on 170 acres, so we have the paddocks that were actually clear felled back in the 1840s. So these are the paddocks where the horses are based today.
And you mentioned the Greene family were the first to come out and settle here. I understand they had a fairly sizable entourage that they brought with them.
Yes, well, as well as 7 children, William Pomeroy and Anne Greene brought out an entourage of 20. That was included their servants, their helpers, along with their children. So they had Emerson the builder, Brannigan the groom. They bought cooks. The cook was also, he slaughtered animals. So they say every couple of weeks there was a 900 weight oxen was slaughtered for meat to provide for the homestead. So they brought out a full team really with them to settle on this property.
And you've done a lot. You've been here for a long time, since Living Legends first started in 2006. So you know probably more about this property than most people. What do you think back then life would have been like for the Greene family? What would a day in the life of the Greene family have been like?
Yeah, well, I think the outstanding thing, this was really a closed, its own community in a lot of ways. You know, they had the schoolhouse, they baked, there was bread made here, there was cheese made here, they had the cattle, they had dairy cows, they had sheep, they had fruit trees, melons. So it was very self-sustained community in so many ways. It was a very exciting, a very vibrant time if you read the history from back in those times. So, you know, the family really started from scratch here and worked up to develop this farm that within a couple of years had over 1,200 sheep. So very, very productive farm.
So today, of course, there are tens of thousands of people that come through Living Legends and to see the homestead as it is today. But racing has been part of the fabric of this property since the Greenes were here. There's a really strong connection to racing, isn't there?
Oh, this is one of the most historic thoroughbred properties in the Southern Hemisphere. If you go back to the Greenes, William Pomeroy brought 2 racehorses with him, his favourite mare and his hunter, and the family were right into the racing from the very beginning. The 2 of the sons, Royden and Molesworth, they were very, very keen riders. They were actually on the committee that formed the VRC. They were involved in the initial race meetings there. And they also held their own race meetings, little social get-togethers of their own community here at Woodlands. Some of the first racing in Victoria was on the property where we have the retired horses today. The Hiskin Steeple, which used to be run at Moonee Valley, it started as a point-to-point here. And if you go through the series of owners, you had just a whole lot of people that were heavily involved in racing. There was C.B. Fisher, and we know the C.B. Fisher played. There were the Chaffeys, so the Chaffeys were great racing people. So there's a wonderful history, and today we have the link with all these retired champions back, and the key horses that come in it, of course, are the Melbourne Cup winners, and the link to the Melbourne Cup goes right back to the Greene family themselves. They were on the committee that saw the first running of the Melbourne Cup back in 1860s.
It's incredible to think that it's really come full circle. Now you've got 4 Melbourne Cup winners here at Living Legends. What do you think the Greenes and the Chaffeys back in their day, if they could see what Living Legends is now and they could see what Woodlands is now, what do you think they would make of that?
I think they'd be shocked in some ways because they'd see the airport right opposite the farm. But I think in other ways they'd be very, very happy because this was a place where there was a lot of socialising. People were happy, they had functions, they got together, and racing was an integral part of it. And really the return of the racehorses with Living Legends in the last 14 years has returned a very historic use of the property. So the horses are back, the socialising back. It's a place for the community to come, enjoy the surroundings, and actually enjoy the travel through time as well, from the 1840s up to the present time, which you can really experience when you walk around the gardens, the homestead and the neighbouring park.
Yeah, there's so much that's original still in the homestead. I know I've walked through a few times, and it's incredible to walk into those bedrooms. You know, there's a gentleman's bedroom, there's the ladies' bedroom, that's all pink. I understand there's a little story you wanted to tell me about the wall between the bedrooms.
Yeah, well, if you go into the gentleman's bedroom, there's a little spot in the corner where there's the plaster's been cut away, but when you look closely, it was a little door that went from the gentleman's bedroom to the ladies' bedroom. And oops-a-daisies, there's as often happens, the gentleman's obviously upset the lady at some stage because that little door's been closed off from the ladies' side of the room. So there's all these wonderful little stories that give you a really idea of what's happened over time through the years with the homestead. Yesteryear.
And just right on cue, the birds have started chirping. There's the homestead, there is the Living Legends horse tours, but there's lots of just beautiful nature to observe here.
Totally. You go through the park, you've got kangaroos in the wild. There's actually over 100 species of native birds in the park, so you can come and really enjoy the full extent of nature, the kangaroos on the hop, but in the background you can see the Melbourne CBD, and we're right beside Melbourne Airport. There's a little ford, a little creek when you first come through the driveway, and once you come through that creek, that's when time starts to stand still and you can just walk back in time, enjoy the nature, enjoy the homestead and all of the outbuildings.
So the Greenes we've talked about a little bit. They were the first family here. They led a very exciting life at the time, entertaining people here in what was a very grand home of its time. What ended up happening to them?
William Pomeroy Greene passed away in 1845, so he didn't live very long here. He had his ill health, so that got on top of him. But the family then continued on with Woodlands until 1866, and that's when the next generations of people started to move in.
So Andrew, we've just stepped inside the homestead now because the wind was really picking up a little bit there. So before we finish, can you just tell us about the homestead and the gardens? They're free to the public. So what can people expect and why should they come and visit?
I think there's the spectacular gardens, the wonderful old trees, the magnolias in the courtyard. And once you walk in the front door, you step back in time to really enjoy the homestead that dates back to the 1840s. It's had its additions over the years. And then you can just really enjoy the homestead to its fullest by having a Devonshire tea right here in the main dining room.
Yeah, and I can say hand on heart, it is the best Devonshire tea I've ever had. Lots of treats in the homestead as well. And of course, they're all available for takeaway at the moment. Thanks for stepping us through the early history of Woodlands today, Andrew. We're going to chat to you in the next episode about some of the later years of Woodlands Homestead, and we'll see you soon.